네, 소중한 시간 내어주게
Welcome
자리해주신
to
모든
the
분들
session.
진심으로
It's a pleasure
환영합니다.
to meet you
그럼
all.
지금부터
We will now
TryEverything
begin
2023
the session
글로벌
titled
탑5
Seoul's Journey
창업
to the
도시를
Global
위한
Top 5
서울의
Startup City
노력
with Startup
with 스타트업
Genome.
지놈 세션을 본격적으로
And welcome
시작하겠습니다.
to Try Everything
안녕하십니까? 저는 본 세션 진행을
2023.
맡은 아나운서 라영란입니다.
I am
반갑습니다.
Nayoung Nan, MC of this session. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
네, 감사드립니다.
Thank you very
함께하게
much.
되실 이번 세션은 세스 스타트업의 스케일업과
So,
글로벌
we
진출
will talk
그리고
about
글로벌
how to scale
탑5
up
창업
the
도시
startups,
서울을
and we
위한
will talk
스타트업
about the
지놈의 제안을
SMG's
함께
plan to
알아보는 시간으로 준비되어
embark on
있습니다.
its journey to the
오늘 첫
global top 5
순서로
startup city.
서울경제진흥원의
And today,
김진환 수석님께서 발제를 진행해
we will
주시고요.
first hear
이어서
from
스윗
Mr. Kim
테크놀로지
Jin-hwan
이종환
of
대표
SBA,
이사님과 또
and
채널
then we will
코퍼레이션
move on to the
김재홍
panel
대표
discussion
이사님
session
함께 세 분
together
모시고
with
세스
Josh
스타트업의
Lee of
스케일업과 글로벌
Sweet
진출
and
전략에 대해서
Mr. Kim
함께 많은
Jae-hong of
이야기
Channel
나눠보도록
Corporation.
하겠습니다.
I hope that
자, 그럼
it
곧바로
provides you a lot of
서울경제진흥원
insight.
김진환 수석님과
And
스윗
without further
테크놀로지
ado, I would
이종환 대표
like
이사님,
to
채널 코퍼레이션
invite
김재홍
Mr.
대표
Lee
이사님
Joo-hwan,
세
Mr.
분을
Kim
함께 스테이지로
Jae-hong, and Mr.
모시겠습니다.
Kim
여러분 뜨거운
Jin-wat
박수로 환영해 주시기
up on
바랍니다.
the stage for the presentation and panel discussion session. Please welcome them with a big hand.
네, 여러분 다시 한번 환영의 박수
Please give
부탁드리겠습니다.
them a big round of applause.
네, 그럼 곧바로 김진환 수석님께
Now, without
마이크
further ado, I
넘겨드리겠습니다.
will now give the floor
네,
to Mr.
반갑습니다.
Kim Jin-hwan.
서울경제진흥원
Yes, hello everyone. I am Kim
김진환
Jin-hwan
수석입니다.
of
반갑습니다.
SBA or Seoul Business Agency. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
네,
So,
스윗
would you like to say hello?
테크놀로지스의
Yes,
이종환입니다.
my name is
반갑습니다.
Josh Lee from Sweet. I'm the
채널
CEO.
코퍼레이션의
Hello,
김재홍입니다.
I am
반갑습니다.
Kim Jae-hong, CEO of Channel Corporation. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
오늘 굉장히 귀한 두 분을 좀 모셨는데요.
Well, thank you very much
오늘
for
이
joining
세션
us today.
자체는
I know
스타트업
that
진흥원과
you're very
함께하는
busy.
글로벌
So,
탑5를 위한 서울의
the
여정이라는
title is
주제로
Seoul's Journey to the Global Top 5 Startup City with Startup
스타트업 진흥원에서 오신
Genome.
분도 계신데
And we do
서울시가
have people
매년
from
스타트업
startups,
진흥원을
and
통해서
every year
세계에서
the
제일
city of
좋은
Seoul
도시에 대한
uses
창업하기
a
좋은
startup
도시에 대한
genome
평가를 받고 있습니다.
to
올해는
receive
세계 12위를
assessment
기록을
about
했고요.
the
그런데
startup
12위를
environment.
하면서
And this year,
어떤
Seoul ranked
분야에
12th.
어떤 그 기업들이
And
해당
in that
생태계에서
process,
핵심적인 역할을 하고
well,
있느냐,
actually, startup
핵심
genome is used to
플레이어로서
analyze
선발을
the
했습니다.
key
그중에서 오늘 두
players
분이 오셨는데요.
who
둘다
are
이제
contributing
IT
the
SaaS
best to this
비즈니스를 하고
ecosystem, and we
있다는
have two
특징이
people
있습니다.
from those
그래서
contributors,
스윗
and
채널
they
덕분에
are
두 군데는
engaged in
우리나라를
SaaS.
대표하는
So we have
IT
Sweet
SaaS
and Channel
기업입니다. 두
Corporation,
곳이 이제 선정이
and the
됐으니까
two
간단하게
businesses
두 곳의
are
어떤 선정 소감 한번 좀 들어보도록
SaaS
하겠습니다.
businesses. So can you please say hello and give them your impression?
서울시를
Yes, Mr. Lee.
대표하는
Yes,
IT 스타트업으로
I am here as an
선정이
IT
되면서
startup
매년
representing the city of Seoul. It's
저희는 4년 반
a
정도
pleasure.
되는 아주
And
early stage 스타트업인데
we are still in the early
감사하게도
stage. It's
미국을
been about
중심으로
4.5 years
글로벌에서
since
다양한
we
프레젠스를 만들고
began
있습니다.
the startup, and we usually do
오늘을
business
통해서
in
저희가
the
어떻게
US
글로벌
market.
진출을
It's a pleasure to be here
하고
again. And
저희가
today I would
나누고
like to
있는
talk about
기회와
how we
가능성들에
do
대해서
business and
나누셨으면
also about
좋겠습니다.
the immense potential going forward.
네, 저희도 이제 한국,
Likewise,
일본을 중심으로
we
비즈니스를
are
하고
mostly do the
있고요.
businesses
최근에
in Korea and
양극장을
Japan, and we
하고
plans to
여러모로
go to the
좋게
US
봐주셔서
market
감사합니다.
recently. And thank you so much for the selection.
책임감 갖고
And I
저희가
have the
성공적으로
responsibility to
가져던
fulfill your
레슨들을
expectation.
나누기 위해서
And I'm
노력하도록
here to
하겠습니다.
share many things and
감사합니다.
insight with you. Thank you so much.
네, 그
Thank you very much.
IT 사스 비즈니스는
So I
포스나
told you that
같은
they're from SaaS
시장
industry,
조사기관에
and
따르면
if you
올해
look at
한 300조
Gartner's or
정도의
Forbes,
시장이 형성이
the
된다고
market
하고요.
size is about
내년
300
성장을
trillion,
하면서
and
2029년까지는 한
going
1,900조
forward
원
by
정도의
2029,
시장의 형성이
the
될
market
것으로
size
예상되고
will grow
있습니다.
to about
그럼에도 불구하고 아직까지
12
좀 일부 미국 같은
1,200
선진국의 영역으로
trillion.
좀
But
판단이
then
되고 있는 것 같아요.
the
그럼에도
industry
불구하고
is
이제
still
국외 기업에서
deemed
많이 좀 선전을
to
하고 계시고요.
be a luxurious
지난달에
industry
그
confined
스타트업
to advanced
코리아라는
industries
종합
such
정보
as
대책을
or countries like
이제
the
정부에서
US.
발표를 했고
And the country
7월
has
달에는
developed a
서울시에서
comprehensive plan, and in July, the
서울
city of
창업
Seoul
2030이라는 계획을 발표를 하기도 했습니다.
also unveiled its
시장이 큼에도
Seoul
불구하고
Startup
이번에는
2030 plan.
아쉽게도
But
IT 사스 분야는
it's a shame that
이게 어떤
IT and
주요한
SaaS
이제
industry
지원 대상으로
were not
선정이 되지
selected
못했어요.
as major
아쉬운 부분이 있을
players
것
or
같은데
industries,
그 부분에
which is a
대해서는 어떻게
shame.
좀 생각하시는지
So, what
좀
is your
전
take on
대표님이
that,
부탁드리겠습니다.
Mr. Lee?
네, 우리가 IT
Well, in
분야에서
fact,
소프트웨어 쪽
like
안에서도 서비스형
we have to drill
소프트웨어라고
down.
불리는
It's not just
SaaS
IT, it's software,
인더스트리가
and you
저희가
further drill
속해 있는
down
분야인데요.
to
이
software
셋의 가장
and
큰
SaaS.
특징은
And
글로벌 익스펜션을
the
빠르고 쉽고
characteristics of
효율적으로 할 수
SaaS is that
있다는
it
거.
enables fast and efficient global expansion. Let's say that we have about 1,000 clients or customers. Their requirements all differ, and we cannot cater to their individual needs. So we have to configure and customize, and we have to enable them to do so on their own. And that's what SaaS enables. And like compared to B2C or consumer markets, we focus on the enterprise market. It is mostly consumed and in the enterprise market. So like in Korea, we have like IT subsidiaries under like large conglomerates, and the market structure or economic structure is quite unique if you look at the Korean economy. So I think that we can play well in this market. And the skill set of software developers in Korea, well, compared to be it ERP or like CRM and so on and so forth, you know, the engineers have extensive level of experience. So I do believe that going forward, we can actually level up to the level of global level, and I think that we can focus our competency.
네, 아까 잠깐 조금 더 부연 설명.
Yes, also
딥테크 영역이 굉장히
deep tech is emerging as a major industry, and Korea chose AI, bio, robotics, as well as fintech as the four major industries. So IT and SaaS are not part of this, and out of the 10 sectors, the national sectors, actually SaaS is not included. So what is your take on that? Can you please elaborate? Well, IT and SaaS is the deep tech of the deep tech. So because there is no single element in this world that does not integrate IT. So every single vertical has IT to a certain degree. So you not just adapt IT, let's say like I'm giving you the example of SaaS, like we can provide not just the out of the box 1,000 products to the 1,000 customers, but we enable them to configure, to change according to their needs. And it will be a DIY type. So they can actually change that, and it's a low code approach that they can take. So as I mentioned, it is the deep tech of the deep tech, and well, we have like robotics or AI emerging as key sectors in Korea, and I believe that we can ride along that trend. Well, it seems like the Korean society is riding along that trend only. So I think we should really give more attention to SaaS.
김재영 대표님도 의견 부탁드립니다.
Mr. Kim, what do you take on
혹시
it?
여기 앉아 계신 분들 중에서
Is there
B2B
anyone
SaaS라는
who have
이 산업이나 용어를 잘
used
아시는
the
분
B2B
혹시
or
손들어 주실 수
SaaS? Is
있을까요?
there anyone who are familiar with this kind of term? B2B SaaS?
그러시면 제가
If
간단하게
so,
일단 그 부분부터 설명을 드리고
Actually, let me explain
넘어가야 될것
about
같아요.
this
이제
because not many raise your hands. Because
90년대 후반에
generally,
사실
back
클라우드
in late
SaaS라는
1990s,
비즈니스의
cloud
시장,
and SaaS
세일스포스라는
market
굉장히 아마
or
들어보셨을 수도 있고
Salesforce, you
들어보지
must be
못하셨을
familiar
수
with this
있는
kind of
그런
terms or
기업들이
not. So
나오기
these
시작했는데
companies emerged
그때 그
fast,
세일스포스가 했던
and
캠페인이
one of
노
the campaigns
소프트웨어라는
done by
캠페인이었어요.
Salesforce was
막
no
데모를
software.
하면서
They did a kind
소프트웨어에다
of
X
demonstration
쳐놓고 no software라고
and
데모를 했는데
drew the
되게
X mark on the
상징적으로
software to
SaaS라는
resist
서비스가
the
무엇인지
software
알려주는
services, and
캠페인입니다.
that
왜냐면
actually
그전까지
ironically
저희가
showed what
윈도우도
the
다
SaaS
PC에
is, because in the past we
설치했었고
installed all the
프로그램을
software
하려면
into your
계속 그
personal
PC에다가
computer like
CD나
Windows
디스크
OS,
드라이브를 넣고
and
막
disk were
설치했었어야
needed to install a
SaaS라는
specific
비즈니스는
software.
이제 저희가
But SaaS
모바일
is
시대에
different because
어플리케이션에
that
접속하면
fits the mobile
내가 별도로 여기다가
environment.
모든 프로그램
So if you have
설치하지
access to
않아도
mobile
클라우드
application, you
서버에
don't need any
동기화가 돼서
hardware. You
편하게
can
쓸
just
수 있고
sync
계속
with a cloud
업데이트가
server
되는 그런
and keep
구조의
updating your
비즈니스를
software.
의미하고요.
That is another form
저희가
of
하는
businesses
일들은
we
이제
met.
그걸
And what we do
B2C뿐만
is
아니라
to provide this kind
B2B
of services
소프트웨어도
to
그렇게
B2B or B2C
그
market.
줌이나
Likewise,
노션, 슬랙 이렇게 아마
like Zoom
들어보셨던
or Slack,
그런
these might be
하나의
more familiar services
클라우드
you may
인프라
use.
안에서
So
사용할
within
수
a specific
있는
cloud
제품의
infrastructure, we
세계관을
create
의미하는데요.
a new ecosystem
이거는 사실
within the specific cloud.
클라우드라는 어떤 환경의 성장하고
Actually, with the
긴밀하게
growth
연관되어
of the
있습니다.
cloud,
왜냐면 어떤
we
차이가
grew as
있냐면
well.
모든 산업형 소프트웨어를
Every
회사마다
industrial
개발해줘야
software
되던 때가
had to be
이제
developed individually,
오라클이라든지
like
SAP라든지
in the
이런
time of
회사들의
Oracle or
시대였는데
SAP in the
지금은 이제
past,
클라우드에
but
하나의
things
서비스만
changed.
잘 만들어 놓으면
All you have to do is
수만
create a
개의
one
고객사들이 다
cloud
거기에
ecosystem,
그냥
and
로그인만 해서 쓸
millions
수
of
있게
billions
만드는
of
서비스가
clients can
저희가 하고
access to
있는
this single
비즈니스다
ecosystem and
이렇게
enjoy the
말씀드릴 수 있을
services.
것
That's
같고요.
what we provide.
그래서 아까 말씀하셨던
So, like you
빅테크의
just
키워드들
said,
뭐 AI라든지
AI
바이오라든지 이런
and
것들이
bio would be some of the big
사스하고
tech
연결이 될 수도
keywords,
있다고
and
생각합니다. 왜냐하면은
there should be
그
connection
키워드
between
예를 들면 AI
those and
서비스가
SaaS,
클라우드로
because
동작하거나
AI can be run on
사스 비즈니스로
cloud
연결이 될
and
수
can be
있느냐
connected
그러면
to
있다라고
SaaS.
말씀드리고 싶고요.
If that kind of connection is
오히려
possible,
근데 너무 감사하게도
I mean, that
B2B
kind of
사스라는
connection is
어떤 하나의
possible,
개념
and
자체를
B2B
세상에 좀
SaaS
더 알리고
is such
여기에
a
대해
new
하이라이트를
concept that
받고자
I want to
하는
promote it further.
니즈가 있다는 건 저희들은 뭐
And
종사자들이
I
너무
also
자랑한
know
것
that there
같고요.
are great needs of
하지만
promoting this kind of
AI라든지
new concept.
바이오라든지
However,
핀테크라든지
AI,
여러 가지
bio,
기술들은
fintech, these
여전히
kind of
사스랑
many
굉장히 밀접하게
technologies
연결될 수 있는
are very
키워드들이다.
closely
이렇게
related when will
말씀드릴
be
수 있을 것
closely
같습니다.
related to the SaaS.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 이게
Yes,
첫
thank you very
번째
much for that
질문하고 연관이
comment.
되어
So
있는데
it is actually
우리나라가 IT
connected to my
강국이라는
first question. So
얘기가
we
많이
say
되면서
that
불구하고
Korea is an IT
실질적으로
powerhouse,
또
but
기업에서
despite
사용되고
that
있는
fact, if you look
소프트웨어나
at the
하드웨어 제품은
softwares or
대부분
hardwares
국산인
that
경우가 많이 있습니다.
the enterprises use, they are like global ones, or like IBM or like CRM is Salesforce and so on and so forth. So they rely on foreign companies. And if you think about that, then it is a system that companies have to use 24/7. So you cannot afford to lose it or to break it in between. So that is why they tend to go to reliable vendors or partners. So when it comes to IT or SaaS, there is this impression that only the advanced countries or advanced companies can be major players, and that is the perception of the market. But still, we do have many SaaS players, the Korean local players, struggling in the market. Then how can we overcome that perception barrier? Mr. Kim?
네, 시장적으로 보면
If you see the market situation, instead of installing a software, you can just simply build a cloud ecosystem and make many clients use it together. That is most cost effective because in the past, like for example, email and security solution had to be developed individually. However, the salary for a developer soared, so it is very difficult to make software individually. For example, if you're a game developer, all you need to do is just do the game developing and just use the outsourced services. So the cloud service costs and developers' costs increase substantially, and naturally the phenomenon you just mentioned happened. So this is just a course of action, I believe. In case of the US, actually there are many tech startups, EPO, MBA version of the IT can be seen in the US. And among the listed companies, 70 to 80 companies are B2B enterprise company, and out of them, 70 to 80% offer cloud-based SaaS services whatsoever. And also in case of Japan, Japan is kind of a different version of the US version because it's very good destination for the US market. It is matured with a good number of population. When compared to that of the Japan, and the population is twice, and when it comes to enterprise market, it is tenfold larger than that of Korea. This suggests that Korea is undervalued and there are so many potential chances you can grasp. I believe that there should be 5 to 10 times forward growth to be expected in Korea. And actually, Japan is still growing and the US market is still growing. And given that 7 to 8% of the US market is SaaS market, so that is a future forward, natural future forward, I believe. You cannot artificially create that kind of phenomenon because naturally it will happen and that is most cost effective. So I believe the B2B SaaS trend will be seen in the Korean market as well.
네, 이주환 대표님.
Yes, Mr. Lee, what's your take on that?
하나의 기업이
Yes, now let's say you provide like software as a service to a specific company. Well, that means that you have to understand the ecosystem of that specific country, or that you have to understand the context and you grow together because like within one company, it has many verticals. So you have like one group company, it has manufacturing, HR and sales marketing and so on and so forth. So you have, you see like multiple functions working together, and like we have have this ecosystem that represent all the verticals. So it's like a small ecosystem, and providing a
그런 소프트웨어에 대한
service
인식과
for
사용,
that.
이런 부분들이 개선이 되고
Software as a service for that, it means that the perception as well as all the different experiences will go up. So by creating such an ecosystem of B2C, I believe that we will see a booming ecosystem. As Mr. Kim said, while I am optimistic still, because like when adopting cloud, actually, Korea was a latecomer in adopting cloud, so it was no way like an IT powerhouse. But then, like a domino effect, I believe that many businesses are now succeeding with their digital transformation journey. So the infrastructure platform is now complete in terms of DX. So now you have like software representation layer, which is SaaS, and I believe that the SaaS will now become the golden player in this market. And I believe that Seoul will lead this trend going forward. Yes, thank you very much. I think that the future is bright. So we touched on the macroscopic context. Now, moving on, like SB, Slack, and Duray are some of the services that they use. But then, like for certain SaaS services, like depending on which one you use, our life may change. So, like IT and SaaS service and adopting these services can actually determine the change of our everyday life. So now we have a suite as well as channel cooperation, and I believe that you are deeply involved in change management. So, from that aspect, how do you help businesses change manage? Or manage change? Well, as for Suite, we try to innovate the ways of working. So we first need to learn the business's ways of learning. So we have EXP program. So it stands for Employee Experience Program. And that's part of the change management approach. So it's the sales approach that we take prior to everything. So first we have to learn their daily work process by each level, because the pain points will differ. It differs from top level executives to managers as well as to working level people. And then we learn the tools. Which tools are used to approve, and what about the tool dependency? What about cross-functional collaboration? What about company-wide initiatives? How many projects are now running? We learn all of those elements, and then what we do is we try to maintain them as much as it is. So we transfer in a stable manner. So when applying Suite, we have to make sure that we provide them in a tailored manner. So we tell them, once you adopt our tool, you don't need to change or fit our tool. What you need to do, we customize your workspace, and that is part of the change management process. Thank you. So now you provide collaborative work tool programs, and what about the channel cooperation? How do you lead change management?
변화 관리라는 거는 되게
Actually, change management is quite critical factor for the software developers, so that's quite a good question. Whether tool is important or the cook is important, I think cook is more important than the tool itself when it comes to food, to give you a knowledge. So we are tool makers. So when we manage control of a specific organization, what do we need to do to help that specific cook? So CRM, live chat are combined in our package, and that is identity of our product, channel chat. So if businesses give some kind of question to the CS, we need to give a good experience of responding to them. And actually, in case of my company, let's say we have a certain tool, and when you use this tool, the philosophy or value of the tool impacts how people live and how people work. So our intention is that CS is quite critical. It's the message you want to deliver, and you need to find out the most regulars to give specialized services for those regular
그렇기 때문에
customers.
변화 관리로는
So in terms of
그렇게
change
해서 비즈니스가
control,
성장하고
if
VIP 고객의
business
인사를 받는 여러
grows and if we can retain
컨텐츠로
VIP
만들어서
content
교육을 할수
customers,
있도록
we need to create a content out of it
그런
and
사례가
use
나올
it
수
for the
있도록
educational purpose and
잠재적으로
trying to
여기는
duplicate the
정말
success
우리랑
by
철학이 맞고 고객들을 훌륭하게
finding
여길
the
수 있는
like-minded
CS를
customers
되게 멋있게 할
in
수 있는
terms of CS so that you
팀이다라는
can create a
발견되면
perfect
저희
CS team. So that kind of success
붙어가지고
stories
실제로
are
그게 정말
tracked
잘
by
돌아갈
my
수 있게
team members so
교육도
that we can
해주고
give
모든 저희가
further
13만 개 고객사가
education
있으니까
to
모든
make
고객사를
it
이렇게 해줄 수는
go
없는데
more in a
한
more
명의
smoother
고객사라도
way.
정말 제대로 쓰게
So
만들고
we
행복하게
want to
만들어서
focus on
그
the small number of the
교보대로
clients so that we
사용해서
can
많은
create a
고객들이
content
쓸
out
수
of it
있도록
and
하는 게
use it
저희
as a
변화 관리하는
reference for other
방식이라고
clients.
말씀드릴 수
That's how
있습니다.
we control the changes.
네. 제가 봤을 때 굉장히 좀
Yes, thank you very much. So that was quite impressive because, like, research shows that when adopting new services or IT services, the utilization rate, like proper utilization rate, is less than 30%. So you adopt it, but then utilization rate is actually very low, and sometimes you would just discard the service going forward. But then you understand the importance of change management, and you help out the customer adapt to that, and that is great. Now, moving on to the next question. So, I would like to ask individualized questions or personal questions. So, now we are here to talk about the scale up and globalization. So, first to channel call.
제가 이제 채널톡 관련된
So
세션을 준비하면서
when I
1년 정도
prepared the
기사 이런 거
session, I looked through all the media outlet articles relating to channel talk, and I thought that I found 3 points that I want to discuss with you. First is that, like the other IT services, in the process of expanding businesses, for example, the channel talk give messenger services to ERP or other collaboration tools, and sometimes your tools are embedded in a specific service. So, from the perspective of a company who provide one single service, how do you respond to the fast-changing environment? That is first change. And the second and third question is that, secondly, you are providing a lot of free of charge services so that you can create a lock-in effect and try to convert them into the subscription, charge subscription service. And so how do you manage that kind of conversion? And the third one is the unit price. I think unit price is quite low in the field of SaaS usually. So how do you manage such a low unit cost problem? What kind of plan do you have to improve your overall revenue? So you can just give the three answers to those three questions once. So thank you so much for tracking us for the past 1 year, and I'm very delighted to hear it. In case of my company, we are in the process of expanding our businesses overseas, like you just said. So what do we need to do to go global? Because we have just one single message service, CRM, live chat, chatbot, marketing, text sending systems are all integrated in this single service system. So this is kind of multi-purpose system. So with a single application called the Channel Talk, we integrate all the communication channels of our customers, and that is our mission as well. So we intend to integrate as much as we can so that the customers can use only a single application. So when you open a business, you register your businesses and open the office. In that case, you can just simply download our application to do all kinds of communication with your customers. That is our future target. So that will be the sole focus going forward as well. So over the last 5 years, we operated the channel talk service, and CLM live libraries were the keyword we had. But going forward in the next 5 years, AI and conversion will be the two additional keywords. And like you just said, this will be the answer to your third and second question. For your second question, the bottom line is for us is the communication, and also scattered communication funnels and channels, calls should be integrated into one single platform. So we're gonna continuously focus on that mission as well. And let's say that we have so many clients and customers, and what do we need to do to make more money out of it?
지금까지 저희는 다섯
So
명에서 100명
far,
사이에 어떻게 보면 스몰 비즈니스
we thought that we focus on the small market between companies with employee between 5 to 100. But even with that group, the revenue differences between those small and medium-sized businesses are quite substantial. Top 20 clients actually accounts for 80% of the revenue we gain. So the customers who are using our services free of charge would not occupy the substantial portion of our revenue. We don't expect that. We just let them to use it, and we don't do any promotion activities, and we just believe in the top of mouth to promote our services in the case. So we plan to improve our target. For example, with the BPO businesses, we are discussing and negotiating a lot, and the call services will launch soon, and the feedback so far has been quite positive. Chat and AI will be all combined to produce a new kind of services which helps people to communicate better. Chatbot and AI will work as a human beings and read the script just like a human being. That is the experience we want to create, and that will our future mission going in the next 3 to 5 years. And instead of focusing on smaller businesses, we will focus on the businesses which are in the need of automation, whose employee number is between 50 to 500. So that will help us to increase the unit price as
세
well.
가지 질문을 한 번에 드렸는데
Yes, so I asked you three combined questions. Thank you very much for that answer. So you may be aware of this, but then Channel Talk actually
해외 진출이 굉장히 좀 많이 돼
like,
있어요.
went global.
지금 22개국
It is operating in 22 countries, and the customer base is about 130,000. And especially, it is quite active in Japan. So about 14,000 customers in Japan, and the penetration rate is quite high. And as you know, like Hyundai Motors and Samsung actually struggled, and Coupang failed in Japan. It had to pull back. But then Channel Talk succeeded and raised a lot of revenue and is growing. So what is your secret behind your growth?
Actually, I don't have any special secret recipe that I can share, honestly. We did a hard work, I should say. So over the last 13 years, I spent 20 years out of it into Japanese market. But still, I believe that we haven't succeeded as much as we wish in Japan. However, many people still believe that between 2 to 25% of the revenue comes from Japan, and you have kind of settled the reputation there, and that is something that goes to our credit. But I think we have still a long way to go. But if you ask how we came this far, one of the tip of the lesson I got from my senior is that which path you go, it will be equally difficult. It's very difficult to make a success in Korea and much difficult in Japan. So we had that kind of mindset that things will get harder. So we tried everything, every possible method. So we did everything. We worked as a reseller and joint venture as well, and also direct and business startup as well. So we tried every kind of forms of entrepreneurship, I believe. And besides the forms of entrepreneurship, what mattered the most for us was that the social proof. So we wanted to become a part of Japanese society, or the US society, Chinese society. If you want to do the business in a specific community, you need to have friends and family there so that you can not be swayed and become a solid part of the community. Actually, the business is a trade for the community members. So this is one of the social activities. So it takes time to become a part of a specific community, especially in case of Japan. This is such a narrow market, and it's very challenging, but still ideal for Korea because it is geographically proximal and the culture is kind of similar because Korean can understand Japanese people better than any other population. So this is the market you cannot miss. So I wanted to create friends and family members in there. So we worked hard to make it happen, and it took longer than I expected actually. So that's how I can say.
진출부터 본격적인 매출이 나오기까지 혹시
So
얼마나
how long did it took to create actual revenue out of the market? Because a lot of businesses says that in case case of B2B market in Japan, it takes at least 5 years to start a businesses and create actual revenue out of it. And you said you spent 13 or 12 years in it. So when did you first sort of rise of the
매출이
revenue?
발생했을 때는
Actually,
중간에 저는 이제 비즈니스를 이게 네 번째 비즈니스가 13년
Actually, this is my fourth
business.
businesses, and when I did a third business, the
오프라인
service was
매장들의
called
이제
working
하드웨어 센서를
businesses,
설치하면
and
와이파이나
if you install the
블루투스
hardware in the
시그널이
offline businesses,
약간 통계를
Wi-Fi
내주는
and
데이터
Bluetooth and business,
매장 밖에
that kind of
몇
signals
명이 있고
usually can be
몇 명이
used to
들어가고
understand the
체크
traffic
시간이
outside of the
데이터를 주는
office and can
것들이었는데
understand the traffic within a specific
그때부터
place as
조인트
well.
벤처는 매출이 나왔습니다.
And actually,
지금은
joint
10명,
venture
20명
create a
정도
revenue
나가실
with
정도의
the
정도 매출을
worth of covering
그때는
the
저희는
salary between 20 to
오히려
30 employees.
기간으로 보면 비즈니스 시작
But
비즈니스를
in terms
시작하고는
of duration, it took 2 to 3 years to create an actual revenue. But that revenue was mainly led by the partner company of my joint venture. So that does not mean that it was not our credit. But Channel Talk created a revenue by on its own. From 2012, I think we have around 20 employees in Tokyo, in Japan. I think it took 3 years to create an actual revenue in Japan, to put it simply.
이거는 사실 일본이라서라기보다는
But
저희
that is not
비즈니스
because we work in
객단가가
Japan,
낮고
but in terms of our businesses, the unit price is quite small, so it took at least 2 to 3 years to create a revenue. So likewise, Japan, it took the same period as we did in Korea.
좀 인상적인 어쨌든
Yes, thank you very much. It was very
사실
impressive.
일본 얘기는 제가
And actually, this Japanese story should go on for a month to cover the whole story. And I hope that we can have next opportunity to listen to your story.
이번에는 이제 스윗 좀 넘어가도록
Now
하겠습니다.
moving on to
지금
Sweet.
제가 한 1년 정도
So I have been reading your articles for the past, of the past, like a year, and competition was fierce in the market. We have MS Teams, and also we also have like Tandy,
카카오워크도 있고 굉장히
카카오워크.
많은 툴들이 존재를 해요.
so many
이제
tools.
결국에는 고객 입장에서
But then from the
스윗의
customer's
어떤
point of
포지셔닝이
view,
어떠냐가 중요한 것 같습니다.
what would be the
본인들
positioning
나름의
of
피처 앤
Sweet?
베네핏이
That will be
있겠지만
key. Of
고객이
course,
봤을
I'm
때
sure that
이제
you have your own
인지될
position.
만한
But then,
차별적인
what
포인트가
would
있어야 될
be
것
your
같은데
differentiation point
시장에서 어떻게
or
포지션을
strength compared to other players? So that is my first question to you, your position in the market. And number two, let's say we have groupware, group workspace, so we don't need any collaboration tools. So I'm sure that that is also a perception in the market.
어떻게 지금 스윗이 대응을 하고
And
계신지
how are you addressing that perception?
그 답변 드리기 전에 좀 물을 마셨는데요.
Yes, so before I give you the answer, I just, had a sip because it will be a challenging, it was a challenging question. So compound
자리가 잡혔는데요.
actually became a trend in the US and BK translated that into Korean and it was introduced in Korea 2 months ago. So enterprise SaaS, we have like GC Bader and so on and so forth. So that existed for a long time, even longer than cloud. And we define that as something that sits on the cloud, but then it existed before the advent of cloud. So that's about 15 to 16 years ago. So when developing one single product, it was one single category and one single function. So that was like the rule in the market because you had to minimize the use of resources because startups need to minimize the use of resources. So agile and lean methodology was considered like a Bible in the market and it was a norm of the market, of the industry. But then 7 to 8 years passed and then many people started to think, well, we have so many single functional tools and we have to connect all of them, which leads to more distraction and more silos within the enterprise and workflow now is fragmented and that was a challenge that arose. So only one workspace became a new trend. Notion or Clicker. So you have like one single product. It's a standalone offering that they provide. However, within that you have multiple functions
그래서 그런 제품들이
like interplaying
굉장히
together.
작은 기업들을 중심으로
And small companies started to offer such a service, and it gained momentum. So, like competitive IT startups started to join the race, and then within just 2 to 3 years, before it was just single function, but in just 2 to 3 years, they exceeded the growth of the single function companies of the past. So it was like, you
저희
know,
인수기업 인수제한도 받은 적이
they
있거든요.
actually, some of the
그
players
제품들이
offered
중견기업과
us
대기업들의
M&A.
어답션이 되지 않고
But then now,
모니터라이제이션에
if you
실패하게
fail
되는
to
일들이
adopt, if you
3년
fail
안에
to
만들어집니다.
monetize,
그들의
well,
VC들이
we
그
see those
기업들에게 요구를 하기
cases in
시작해요.
just 3 years, and
중견
they
대기업들이
will
돈을
blame
내고
the
쓰는
VCs.
고객들인데
And
왜
they
그곳들에서는
actually,
우리 제품을 쓰지 않고
the customers
작은
pay
팀들만
the
쓰게 하고
mid to
근데 그
large-sized
기업들이
companies, and
엔터프라이즈에서
anyways,
그런
that
툴들을
cause the
구입하지 않는
trouble.
이유들은
And the
여러 가지가
reason
있었지만
why
가장 큰 이유는
clients use those tools is because of this. Of course, there are many reasons, but I will give you the single most
오버랩이 많이 일어났다는
common
겁니다. 그러다
reason.
보니 중복
It's
투자의
overlapping
이슈를 피할 수가
functions.
없었어요.
So
그래서 이제
investment was
2년 전부터는
also
실리콘밸리를 중심으로
duplicate.
어떤
So
엔터프라이즈
from 2 years
소프트웨어에서는
back,
스타트업이 나와야
the trend that we
하느냐라는
see
이야기를 할 때
in Silicon Valley is that
지금
the
현직
partners
데카콘과
of
유니콘의
popular
CEO인
VC and the CEO of Decacorn, Mr.
이제 엔터프라이즈
Park,
소프트웨어 스타트업들은
what he says is that the enterprise
하나의
startups,
싱글
they have
카테고리에 있는 제품을
to
만드는 것이 아니라 더 큰 문제를
focus
해결해주는
on
컴파운드 스타트업스가
compound startups.
왜냐하면
They have to become compound startups because the HeartSpot CEO said that we now live in overloaded culture. So before tool overload culture. So before, like, you know, you had to invent 1 or 2 tools and you could become the CEO of a unicorn. But now you have like at least 2 to 3 tools per company, which means no opportunity left out for the remaining startups. And for over 10 years, you know, SaaS has been existing. So we had like one generation of SaaS, and then we endured the pandemic, and then within just a few cycles, we have seen like the rise and fall of SaaS for multiple times. So our proposal must be different. So we have 242 SaaS. Which is being used by average US company. So let's say we have like 16 functions per organization, and they use each function uses at least like 15 SaaS tools. You know that the 242, you will get the number very easily. So now we have too many tools. You know, we are flooded by tools. How are we going to, like, you know, diminish the return on effect and also make sure that they interwork in a smooth manner? So we have like Slack. So we have a chat function, or like Asana or Monday.com. We also have project work management function. But the problem is that the customers, we want them to pick and choose and go minimal or go with a powerhouse approach upon their needs. And the pricing should follow, should match those needs. So if you choose to go with one single SKU, then okay, then we propose an idea that fits that single SKU. And before we create this all-in-one workspace, but then now our chat function compared to Slack, you know, it was very weak. And we have test and project functions, but then like compared to Asana or Monday.com, our functions lag behind. But for the past 4 years, we improved the functions, and our chat function actually can replace Slack completely. And our task function can also beat the players, the other players 100%. So Suite 2.0 was released last week, and the pricing was also released. And the 25 people startup, well, actually, for these, they can use our service in less than $1 per person because we offer price competitiveness. So we do not just rely on a single function like chat. We have chat, task, project and OKR, KPI approval, and so on and so forth. So all these functions are used as building blocks, and you can actually assemble them or dismantle them as Lego blocks. And so we read the market trend, and we also read the maturity level of where our players play. And at the same time, we also look at price. And all these elements should be aligned for startups to succeed in the marketplace. And in that context, we have like MS 365 and Google Workspace, and those customers are our customers. So like if you're already using Google or MS 365, then if you wish to go with a company-wide software as a service, then the next selection will be Suite. So we have like email, like video conferences and calendar, and so on and so forth. You all use these functions, but they lack two functions. So like a front-end hub where you can utilize all these functions in one single space, and you don't have project management workspace. And we are the best player that can cater to those needs. Yes, thank you very much for that answer. So you talked about compound, so that keyword really popped up, and we talked about Salesforce, like we have, they acquired like Tableau and other companies, they wish to provide like compound services like the ones you just mentioned. And they also wish to separate like the functions so that the users can, at a more affordable cost, use the services of their needs. So you talked about that, but then maybe you two could compete in the future? Not yet? Or what's your take on that?
CX 쪽이고요.
Well, they are doing CX and we are doing EX. So the customer base is completely different. So I'll give you one example. Like I'll go first.
우리나라 같은 경우는
So I'll give you the case of Korea. Like collaboration
피처가
tool
몇 개 겹치면은
provides like multiple features, and then once you see that, you tend to think that they're competitors. However, like which market adopts it? It could be vertical-wise or like size-wise, like SMB, mid-market, enterprise, and the preferences will be completely different. And it might be the same function, but if you target different market, then the category design itself will differ. But then in Korea, like I believe that SaaS maturity is at a lower level, so the perception level is also low. So it could be the same functions, but do we connect the customer experience, or is it like at the EX level that provides like enterprise level services? I mean, the outcome will be completely different. So we are working on collaboration ideas. Yes, Mr. Kim?
Because actually, internal communication and external communication are the two functions you have in the channel talk.
본질적으로 저희는
Fundamentally,
커뮤니케이션이랑 고객 관리를
we communicate with the clients to help them communicate with their own clients as well. So we don't see any overlapping kind of targets. So as far as I know, those two companies will be the rival to each other, and when that time comes, that will be the heyday or renaissance of the Korea SaaS market, I believe. So actually, I have another question.
스윗이 아시겠지만은
So my question goes to Suite.
그 스타트업 투자를 하지 않았던
So SK Broadband never invested in startups, but then SK Broadband actually invested in you. SK Broadband and LG CNS and Korean Air, they are all your customers. So we have like big companies, like big shots, investing in you, and also they are your customers. And what is their feedback?
말씀해 주셨던 SK 그룹
Well, like within SK Group, a number of subsidiaries adopted our service. So SK Broadband and SK Telco, they're part of the umbrella, but then their CEOs are different. Their security regulations and compliance checklists are completely different. So they're like standalone companies. But they have like a task force that bring them together. Then like it's impossible for us to tell them, you have to meet our ways of working or follow our ways of working. So instead of offering a fragmented tool, we were seeking a unified ways of working, and we referred to a consultation firm in the States, and then SK matched us to that consultation firm. And then we first started small, and then it expanded to like 500, 600 people. And then once SK Telco finished adoption, then we expanded to other subsidiaries. So like the entire duration was about a year, but then in 5 to 6 months, 1,000 people joined us as users, and we still see the growth. So we have like this SK store, this e-commerce platform, and they actually adopted us as an enterprise platform. And SK Group was using MS365 and also Google. And if that's the case, then their next selection go-to service will be Suite. And the same goes to Korean Air. So Google Workspace was adopted at an enterprise level, and product management and front-end hub was the services that they were looking for. And then they adopted us, and then 2 years passed, and then within Hanjin Group, we have Hanjin Telco, which also adopted our service. And now we have the captive market and also the reselling market, which uses our service as well. So we resell the product to others as well. So we have a contract in place. And for LG CNS, it's a specific case because it's the largest ITSM group in Korea, which means many IT projects. And actually, their partner go beyond tens of thousands. So they had to manage all the multiple tools in one single space or hub. So it was not a single collaboration approach, but an enterprise collaboration approach. And I believe that to that end, our needs met. Thank you very much for that. Now, Suite, your headquarters is in the States. You have for Moloko, Sandbird, and Suite. You all have your headquarters in the US, and in Korea you have the developer team. So that's my understanding. And does that help you from the scaling up or globalization point of view? What are the strengths or weaknesses to that? First, weakness. Now, the U.S. was responsible for go-to-market, and Korea was responsible for development because we thought that would be capital efficient. But then now we see a larger customer base in the States. So what we are seeing is that we don't have enough people to address the needs to respond to the US customers. And actually, the people have to be in the States because you have to be in the same time zone. So about 2 years ago, we reshuffled everything. Before it was a geographically split organization. But what we are doing right now, we have sales, marketing staff beefing up in Korea and vice versa in the States. So if you wish to go global from the get-go, of course, please do not make the mistake. Do not make the mistake of splitting up the teams based on the geography, because in 184 countries we provide our service. And then if you ask me the question, what enabled you to do so? Well, actually, a global mindset can lead to a global team. So we in Korea, in developing global services, I believe that we have many cultural hurdles. What I mean by that is this: during the pandemic, we worked from home. And as a result, our perception of remote working improved. So work from home was the trend that we were going toward, but in Korea, we kind of went back to pre-COVID. But then now in the States, hybrid is a default ways of working. But why not in Korea? Because we very much focus on the same time zone, same people, same race, and same so and so. So now asynchronous collaboration is the norm in the US. So all the SaaS tools that was developed in Silicon Valley went global because it was not Western focused, but because Silicon Valley is a melting pot of races, they were able to go global because they understood the different, the diverse cultures, and through the clash of the cultures, they were able to spread that out to their own homelands. So Silicon Valley is well fit for that. So why do we have our headquarters, or why other unicorns have their headquarters in Silicon Valley? That gives you the answer why. Okay, only global organizations can provide global services. That was your message. Thank you very much for that. We don't have much time, so I will now give you one common question. So now we have the audience with us today, and also we have people from SBA as well as Seoul Metropolitan government as well as large companies, and especially when you think about the public sector like IT and SaaS, the perception level regarding IT and SaaS is relatively low. So in the public sector, maybe you might have some customers in the public sector. I believe that you do channel talk, but most of the time the public sector still relies on phones. Then which segment would receive a lot of help from your service?
Actually, I frequently ask to provide a service for the war veteran official website.
말하면은 뭐 여러모로
Because in many sense, you need to give repetitive message, and that does not require any human intervention. In the case, we can pretty much can cover all the areas, I believe. And one news article tells that in case of RAT, after the adoption of Channel Talk, the call reduced by 70%. Is said. So we always use the call to ask something to an organization, and if that's the case, Channel Talk service, adoption of Channel Talk service can help the public organization to reduce the workload substantially. For sure, of course. Okay.
Now moving on to Suite, as I mentioned in my opening, now SB uses Slack, and I'm not sure about the Seoul Metropolitan government, but they probably don't use any services like that. What would be your strength when the public sector would adopt your service? Well, actually, their organization keeps reshuffling or changing, and they need clear outputs or deliverables, like how you worked and what was the deliverable. So history management is actually essential to public sector. So now you're using Slack, but then with a few clicks, can migrate. So please migrate to Suite. Yes, thank you very much. This is my final question to you. So now we are here with two companies. You're in the pre-unicorn stage. So you might be in need of the funding or assistance from the public sector or Seoul City. And for your growth and for IT growth, what do you expect the Seoul City government to provide you? Anything, Mr. Kim?
네, 저희 같은 경우는
In case of my company,
공공기관들도 결국에는
public organization likewise is the one who provides the services to the citizens. So they serve the citizens. So when you communicate with their citizens, the most proven technology tool must be used. If that's your needs, we are ready to give the service.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Lee. Well, we are Korean founders. Of course, we are a U.S. company, but we are Korean founders, and we have their headquarters in the States. But anyways, for foreign companies and with foreign CEOs, they receive a lot of benefits in Korea. But then for us, most of the shareholders are Korean, but because the CEO is Korean, we cannot be recipient of the public assistance. So if you can be more flexible with your criteria or qualification criteria, it would be great. Thank you very much for
우정미 시장님도
that.
오시는데
So
뵐수
later
있을지
on,
모르겠습니다만
Mayor O
뵐일
will
있으면
join
그렇게
us.
말씀을
So
두 분이
if you
못하시면
do
제가
get an
대신
opportunity
좀
to meet him
전달을
in
해드리는 걸로
person,
하고요.
then
오늘
please
짧은 시간 좀 들어주셔서 감사하고요. 오늘 참가해주신 두 분
tell
대표님께 큰
him
박수
so.
부탁드리겠습니다.
If not, I will tell him so. Well, thank you very much for your time. With that, we will wrap up this session. Thank you.
감사드립니다.
Thank you so much for your heated discussion. So we invited three speakers to discuss the search journey to the global top 5 startup city with startup Genome. So at this conference hall, we're having this session and the title is, as you see, the Seoul's journey to the global top 5 startup city with startup Genome. And also, through the Seoul Strategy 2030, we plan to become a top 5 city by 2015, and we're all here to collect our wheels and wisdom together. And 50 unicorns will be expected to be fostered, and 10 out of them will from the manufacturing and ITs. And the discussion taught us that the IT SaaS companies are key players in this process, and I hope that they can make a success not just in Korea. And they shared a lot of tips on things we need to consider when we go forward. And it was moderated smoothly by Mr. Jim and Mr. Lee and Mr. Kim from Sweet and Chana Corporation, shared a lot of insights with the audience. Especially at the very last, they said that only global company can go global and can provide a global services, and that was quite an impressive remark they made. And for the next presentation, we are arranging the stage, and I think we finished the stage arrangement. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Stefan Quester from the Ecosystem Strategy and listen to his tips for the Seoul to become the startup city and how to advance it. So let me invite Mr. Stefan Quester to the stage. Please give a warm round of applause. Please give a big round of applause.
Please welcome him onto the stage with a big round of applause. Would you please say hello to the audience first?
Hello, Ayong Hasiu Seoul. Hello, Seoul. Hello, TryEverything. My name is Stefan from Startup Genome. It is a great pleasure to be back again. I think I had the pleasure of being invited to speak at TryEverything since 2019 or 20. Greatly and have enjoyed, and we as a firm have enjoyed the rise of Seoul as such a successful startup ecosystem. I still very fondly remember our session that we had exactly a year ago in this very place. Today, no small challenge. We were asked to come up with ideas, our perspective on how Seoul can become a top 5 global ecosystem. That's ambitious. That's no small feat. Gave us a bit of a headache, but we tried to think through a number of topics, a number of themes, a number of strategies that really could further, hopefully, inform policymakers and ecosystem leaders here in Seoul. Who are we? Startup Genome, a small, highly specialized research and policy advisory firm out of San Francisco and London. We work towards understanding ecosystem performance. We rank ecosystems. We publish a ranking report, Global Startup Ecosystem Report, every year, very much anticipated with great resonance in the public. That's what you know us from. But we don't do ranking just for the sake of ranking and to assign a rank to a city or a region, but we do it to inspire policy discussion, to see what works, what works less, what can we learn as a network of today more than 130 or so ecosystems from each other. What does inspire us? That's really what we are in for. That's what we do. We are a bunch of entrepreneurs and ex-business consultants all working towards making these policy experiments and this advice as effective as possible and bringing entrepreneurship to as many places in the world as possible. And I think as a world, we are making progress there. So many more cities in Korea, elsewhere, participating outside of the top 10, top 20 tech clusters. So we've come a long way, but we still have quite a way to go. Back to topic, how can we become a global top 5 ecosystem. Before we do that, I would love to, if this works, give me a sec. Might need a bit of help. Is that one? Oh, there we are. Sorry. Where are we? 3 topics. First of all, Seoul, where are we right now in our global ecosystem ranking and what can we learn from that position? A little bit of insight. We launched the GSER report a few months ago in London and in Amsterdam. And we will certainly have the next one coming in June next year, so next time to measure. From there, 3 ecosystem opportunities we believe are the top priorities to consider if we want to become one of the top 5, the top leaders, the top echelon of cities in the world for tech entrepreneurship. And last but not least, a few simple recommendations. Underneath those is a lot of detail that we can go into Q&A or after the session here if you're interested. So where are we right now? First of all, let me get out of the way. This is our ecosystem ranking from this year, fresh from data processing. And there has been quite a lot of movement, not so much in the absolute tops. Silicon Valley, London, and New York always ruled the world for tech, and they continue to do so. But the other ecosystems have seen growth and changes, and some have declined in their rankings. I think there are 1 or 2 big themes coming through, particularly in the Asia region. Indian ecosystems are on the rise, broader, more of them, undoubtedly, whilst China, not the least due to COVID policies and other economic issues, has really lost its shine and luster a little bit. That's certainly reflected in the rankings. More interesting, one of the top ecosystems and one that we'll be talking about in a minute, Tel Aviv has impressed us immensely. It already has been within the top 10 for years. But to make it into the top 5 category was an extraordinary feat for what in the end is an ecosystem that sits in a very small economy and in a very small population. Extraordinary policy, extraordinary activities that we should have a closer look at. And last but not least to mention, Singapore. Singapore was always one of the highly regarded ecosystems in Asia. We never saw, though, the growth, the scale-up growth, companies really coming out of Singapore, conquering the world, and creating the bigger scaling stories, the bigger valuations. We have not seen that for 10, 15 years. Now we see it. Singapore jumps by 10 points. Again, something to look at because it speaks to a scaling journey from Singapore out into the world. It has finally happened, but it has taken 15, 20 years, and we've been working with these policymakers. Something to point out. Seoul, number 12, so nearly unchanged. We dropped by 2 ranks. I think that's pretty normal in this category. Rankings always fluctuate a little bit, so nothing to be sad about. That would be the wrong message. I think it's an extraordinary positioning for Seoul. Last year, I could say top 10. Yeah, that sounds somehow better, but the meaning is the same here amongst the top ecosystems for tech worldwide, undoubtedly. Brief look at the Asian ecosystems, what I already mentioned. Where is Seoul positioned? Number 4. And if you would take out China with its large domestic market that behaves completely different, it's completely different growth dynamics from the rest of the world, we would rank Seoul as the number 2 ecosystem just behind Singapore. I think that's a hugely positive message and one to tell loudly and clearly. Again, this has been a sustained journey. I think that's always important for us, not to look at 1 year only, but to see what has happened over time. And I think you can see the results from 2019, number 53 in the world in our ranking, to a number 10, number 12 position in the world. Great policy, the activation of community, nearly 5,000 startups we believe to measure, at least in Seoul. These are the really growth stories. We see the evaluations come through. We see the unicorns coming through with this phase. The big message here is this seems to be a sustained position at the top of ecosystems worldwide. We rank more than 300, so being 10 or 12 is a very, very respectable, very high position indeed. We also use a model that we call ecosystem maturity model that tells us how does an ecosystem behave. There are certain characteristics, and we place all the ecosystems in the world into 4 categories. The right-hand side is London, New York, and Silicon Valley, of course, nobody else. And then the others are distributed. From a performance perspective, we rank Seoul at the end of the globalization phase. That's where companies start stepping out of the domestic market. They start attracting resource, venture investment from abroad, start attracting top talent from abroad. We see Seoul really at this cusp of from globalization to activation. Why is that important to us, this model? Not for model's sake, but because it indicates the need for a policy, for a significant policy change. So the old recipes, they have been so successful, 53 to 10 or 12 in the world. Now is the time to rethink them a little bit in order to get to this next phase that we would call activation ecosystem phase, where the top echelon of ecosystems of cities in the world really sits. That's what we can deduce from a decade of research, yeah? To think about it, to say, okay, the old recipes have helped us, now is a new dawn, a new day, and we need to change TAC and SBA and SMG, whom we have been working with so much over all these years, with their vision for 2030 have certainly already taken these steps. So what would it take for Seoul to become a number 5 ecosystem? Let's compare ourselves. I will show a few, as a warning, as a health warning, I will show a few data with a minus or a gap and lots of red on the slide. This is by no means criticism regarding Seoul's performance. We are comparing ourselves, not against the world, but we are comparing against ourselves against the top 5 in the world. So no surprise if there's a little bit of red on these slides. First of all, we've plotted out the top 5 ecosystems. You see them here: Silicon Valley, New York, London, Los Angeles, Tel Aviv, and Seoul. The number of startups, for us, important. We need a big community, lots of experiments in order to create scale-up success, high valuations, unicorns. It is a numbers game, and it stays a numbers game. So that's one of the axes that's important to us. On the other axis, we show ecosystem value. That's all valuations plus exit values combined. And you can see for yourself where we are. Here, about 55% of the median size of all ecosystems. So we're not comparing against Silicon Valley, but the median value of the top 5, just to give you a little bit of a perspective. That's where we are. And to unpack that a little bit more, hopefully. Oops. Really sorry. There we are. Here we are doing a comparison across different ecosystem success factors, as we call them. You see them here: ecosystem value, number of active unicorns as a proof, as a result, number of exits over 50 million, so companies that have reached scaling growth stage, seed median size of funding rounds, again, an indicator of how meaty, how large are these seed rounds that enable companies to really invest into product, to invest into building market reach. Are they big enough? And then a little bit of performance factors around what is the exit value, what are the number of exits. That's just a function of success in the end. Tel Aviv is our comparison, and here's Seoul. And we see, and that's what I meant with the red elements, of course, we are not yet at number 5 performance. You can see the different gaps here. I think they are quite similarly placed. We just need to be aware of that. From our perspective, there are a number of factors influencing those, and I want to unpack these a little bit going forward. Again, same picture with the median of the top 5 ecosystems in the world compared. You can see for yourselves the differences where we still are. So the overall message, it's still a way to go. But again, we are comparing with the absolute top in the world. What would it mean to catch up with Tel Aviv within 5 years? Is this realistic at all? We believe it is. Startup creation. Tel Aviv today shows 6,400 something startups in our methodology versus 4,800 something in Seoul. If you want to catch up within 5 years, that's a compound annual growth rate of 6% per year, 300 startups per year, something the like for Seoul. And we believe that's entirely possible to create this growth. This is not a scenario that's unrealistic to believe is achievable. Our typical growth rate that we measure across many ecosystems would say 6% is absolutely manageable. Yeah, that's what we really would like to see if we stay with a simple measure such as startup creation. So making the ecosystem even larger, and then we will see ecosystems behave like funnels. I need a big base, thousands of startups, and then we will see the higher valuations and the ecosystem value to increase as a function of that. If you compare again, comparison to the top 5 in the world, the median values, the things get a little bit more ambitious. We would need to grow by 30% in terms of startup population per year. From my perspective, I've never seen that anywhere. 10, 15%, maybe, just about. I think this is a bit unrealistic. So I think if we focus on Tel Aviv as a yardstick, we are well advised. It's something that's realistic for policymakers to consider, for ecosystem leaders to consider, not to have goals that are too ambitious and maybe unrealistic at some point. How do we get there? What should we do practically? We believe there are 3 lenses to look at ecosystem development for Seoul. The first one, capitalizing on the deep tech opportunity that undoubtedly is here, and it's here to stay. Secondly, driving scale-up success. We heard in the session beforehand how scaling works, how approaching international markets can work so successfully. And last but not least, we also believe there are still some remaining funding gaps in the funding landscape for Seoul that we jointly should have a look at and try to address. Seoul can capitalize on its R&D prowess. We know Seoul, we know Korea as one of the most innovative countries in tech in the world in every ranking that we look at. And how does that fit into the world of startups? We've seen deep tech startups based on deep tech-based technology startups provide all the growth in startup ecosystems over the last few years. It is the generation of deep tech that we are in. You can see it here, 41% of all startups created and of all deals that we have measured are in deep tech already, coming from a much lower base 10 years ago. So we are in this wave of deep tech, undoubtedly. What's happening in deep tech? What we are showing here is exit values. So these are the mature on the horizontal axis. What is maturing in the world? And on the y-axis, this is Series A growth, an indicator for dynamics in an ecosystem. And what we really can see is that advanced manufacturing, robotics, it is showing the exits. It is still showing a huge dynamic. There's a lot of seed and Series A money going into it. No doubt we are in an age where manufacturing capability, people are scarce, human resources are scarce, and we are all in the world driving automation, automated production, supply chains, etc. So that's exactly where deep tech is happening. It is certainly happening in clean tech, finally, second approach. We had one in the 2000s or 2010s that didn't really lead to scaling companies, didn't really lead to impact. That has fundamentally changed. We see the exits coming through, the maturity of the clean tech segment, and we see a lot of dynamism. No wonder we are talking climate change. We got demand-led policies that actually seem to work in Europe, in the US, and in parts of Asia, and they have an impact on our industry. Last but not least, AI and big data today embedded in nearly all deep tech ventures and technologies. Again, one of these segments that no ecosystem can afford not to invest in. Yeah? AI, big data needs to be a core part of any strategy from our perspective. You see a few others that are falling off a little bit. EdTech, as an example, digital media. These are the things of the first and second generation of the internet, less hot, less successful. So it's clearly the deep tech story that we have to tell and to capitalize on. These are the AI deals globally. And again, you can see the rise here. 23% of all startups already have AI at the very core of their tech stack. They would not function without a core AI engine. And that's only going to grow, so we believe. Does Seoul show the characteristics of a future leader in deep tech? Yeah. We believe yes. And we use a model in which we categorize all the startup ecosystems in the world into different archetypes. They're the first and early movers. That's Silicon Valley, the founders of tech. Technology production, these are the R&D powerhouses in the world. They have certain characteristics. We got others, very large, differentiated markets. That's China, that's maybe India, that's North America, the US. Openness, quality of life, these are the creatives, the Barcelonas, the Berlins and others that are more living from their creatives and arts. And last but not least, the global business and financial centers, being New York and London, for argument's sake. Why are we trying to make these categorizations? Because policies, investment into policy activity is fundamentally different in these different ecosystem archetypes. So it really helps us devise the right approach. And undoubtedly here, we got a list again of where they are. This is the result of our mapping. We use a lot of data points to do that. And the yellow line describes Seoul, and it is very firmly, these are the R&D powerhouses in the world, the Tel Avivs, the Stockholms, and others, that for us are the leaders in the deep tech R&D-led ecosystem development. Seoul is firmly here. It shows all the right characteristics in STEM talent, PhD production, corporations that are investing into technology, etc., etc. But interesting, and I really find this incredibly encouraging. We are also seeing a little bit of a bulge here in the data around the arts and the creative industries, and this mix of R&D powerhouse, but also the creative industry, from our perspective, is a hugely positive combination that can only power Seoul further forward. When we look at R&D powerhouses, what has worked well for those that were the leaders a while ago, that really early on were betting on an R&D-led ecosystem development strategy, being Tel Aviv, being Stockholm. High levels of R&D investment, same in Korea. STEM and PhD talent investment development, same here. Absolutely competitive, if not better. What did they do? They grew their global connectedness, global market reach, making their companies step out of their very small domestic markets, of course, Israel or Sweden, very, very early on, and really helped them towards developing a foothold in the US market, the European markets, and elsewhere. So really this stepping out, letting the companies even move to other locations, seeing that as a positive for somebody coming from Stockholm, going to London and scaling to a world market leader there. That was accepted as a good strategy that would work, and it paid back in terms of the development of these ecosystems. So really the outward, that's what I'm trying to articulate here. Let's not look at ourselves, but let's look at how can we step outside of the Korean market early on if we are in deep tech, if you want to make deep tech work. Last but not least, they've invested heavily in what we call lab to startup ecosystem efficiency. These are the on-ramps. So you got the academics doing a lot of research, patents, citations, publications, and then we got the totally different world, the entrepreneurs such as us. How do we bring these two worlds together? How effective are we in taking an idea from a lab code to a real business? That's what we try to measure. That's certainly what Tel Aviv, certainly what Sweden has mastered, and is a good example to learn from. So here are the results, lab to startup efficiency in life sciences. I've jumped one too far. Advanced manufacturing robotics I wanted to bring first because it's so important for the Korean economy and something where R&D is at such a high level. So here we show on the horizontal axis, how good are we in our R&D, our universities, our academic institutions, how good are we at innovating? And Seoul is a leader globally in that perspective. The y-axis, how good are we in terms of ecosystem performance, meaning taking these ideas and creating businesses out of them. And that's where we still have gaps. We can see it here. Tel Aviv is on par in terms of academic prowess, but it is much more effective in taking the ideas from the university into business. I don't think anybody is surprised, but this is something to learn from, to look at, to study. Now we should see the same for life sciences. It's nearly the same picture. Forgive me, this is a bit slow. This is life sciences. Again, here's Seoul, one of the leaders in terms of academic results, R&D research, but in terms of really creating an ecosystem in life sciences and bioscience, San Diego is inferior. Less academic prowess, less patents, less deep insights, but so much more effective in bringing it to a real-world application into ecosystem development. So again, examples where we should study more, learn from, and try to emulate what seems to be a successful strategy. Same in AI. Again, here's Seoul, there's Tel Aviv. We're competing in the academic world, eye to eye, but we are not yet competing in terms of creating the startups. So this is the huge opportunity. Next question, how do we exploit the deep tech opportunities, if they are so important? Key issues from our perspective, and we've been testing that with a lot of different cities, is really to think ecosystem-wide. If I want to play in deep tech, I need the larger corporations. They need to participate. They are my first clients. We heard it for SAS this morning. Right? It's a B2B game. So how do we make the corporations more open towards collaborating with the startup ecosystem, engaging in open innovation, buying from startups? Where are we here, and how can we improve culture and the executive board? How open is the CEO, the CXO, the C-suite in terms of working with startups? Personally, I had the opportunity to work with 150 companies, large corporations in my life. It is no small feat to convince executives to have a different approach to their innovation processes, to bring outside innovation in, to bet on a startup ecosystem, on startups, to help them address their corporate challenges. But it is entirely possible. Open innovation programs, grant challenges. Switzerland, in the UK, elsewhere, we've run experiments around defining problems that are too large for even the largest companies to resolve in their own right, but rather to build consortia consisting of large corporations, public sector agencies, innovative startups to tackle big societal, big economic problems jointly. Yeah, so they really come together as a startup ecosystem and become more permeable and collaborate better. These are the things that we believe need to be addressing. Don't waste a good moment of crisis. That's also one. We saw the effects that COVID had on driving investment into technology, and I think we are in a similar position here. Economic recession around the world. We need to get more productive. Technology will help us. Deep tech will help us overcome these challenges. Same for clean tech. Same for so many other applications. That's certainly a call to action where corporate executives might be more open than they have been in the past. Universities, culture. If I'm a young student today, or it's not a young student, a PhD, I want to become a professor, I better start publishing. I better get a lot of citations that will be rewarded in typical university culture, certainly in Europe. I believe it applies in large parts of Asia as well. That's certainly what's happening. Can we change that? Can we change it at the institutional level? Can we encourage university, the deans, the leaders of universities, to pay more attention towards those that are innovating or inventing in the lab, but also innovating in terms of supporting the creation of companies. Fundamental change in the academic mindset that needs to come. More formal incentives for professors, young professors, researchers to engage in activities that are commercialization of their research. These are the topics that we need to address and really explore. More systematic programs, open innovation programs, tech transfer, certainly funding for experiments for researchers to be able to take their ideas and build a startup, grants to run with those. This is the typical mix of activities we would recommend. We are doing that at the moment. It's not easy with a large university cluster in Melbourne. It is a very difficult journey, particularly when you look at culture, when you look at incentives to change the apparatus of a university environment and the culture and the mindset. But it is possible, and it is certainly happening. Fundamental ingredient for our startup communities, if all this happens, I think we are in a great spot, because as entrepreneurs, we get not presented, but we get engaged with problems that are really worth solving for, coming from the corporates, coming from invention, from deep tech, from deep innovation in research. We hopefully can have access to better facilities when we are in deep tech. We need the labs, we need a production environment to test our products. That needs providing for. Again, coming back to the Melbourne example, when I talk to the deep tech startups there, or the life sciences startups there, saying the biggest constraint we have in the universities is the availability of wet labs. Simply not available. The big corporations are taking them all. We don't have access. This is something we need to change, and that's where policy can help. Real client contracts. Clients, corporations that are willing to buy from us as startup entrepreneurs, that will give us real testing opportunity and revenue, and the entire engine starts to spin. So it's not the one silver bullet. It's a mix of all these different activities that would allow us to build a better deep tech environment. Here we've put together, and I don't want to read them out in detail, different policies at the research base. That's the academic part on the left-hand side. In the middle, the intermediaries, the tech transfer units, what needs to change there? What are recommendations for this intermediate layer between research and economic use? And then, of course, ecosystem factors. I want to point out one or two. At the national policy level and the institutional policy level, the treatment of IP ownership. is maybe one of the biggest ones that need addressing from our perspective in so many places in the world, where IP still belongs to the university, belongs to the investment when it is a state-run program, belongs to the state. This is not a way to incentivize somebody to create a company. It's not a way to incentivize an investor, a seed stage VC, to go into an investment for a startup. That really needs to change. Learning from Tel Aviv, learning from Stockholm are good examples here. This is one from our perspective to point out, many others on that list. Second one, driving scale-up success, our second lens, our second part of strategy recommendations we really would like to make. We've analyzed what we call Seoul baby unicorns already last year for you. So apologies, it's an old slide, but it is still relevant. The blue line from our perspective are companies valued between 50 million and $1 billion in Seoul that have what it takes. They are unique in their business model, in their application of technology. They could be the next global category leaders. The red line, this is more Me Too business models we've seen elsewhere, and there's maybe less scaling potential in the world. That's where we are. There's a huge population of really innovative companies, but then when we analyze what is their market reach, what is the percentage of revenue they are generating outside of their domestic market, you can see it here, the vast majority, this is Seoul, the vast majority of their business is still very, very domestic. This is fundamentally different behavior to the other ecosystems that are so much more geared towards catering to a world market, to addressing a global market. Look at London as an example, as an extreme example here, or Tel Aviv, even more extreme. They are building for the world from day one. So how can we change that? Global market reach, the connections we have, and we measure them at Startup Genome for all the ecosystems as part of our ranking. Where are we here in Seoul? These are the different factors: ecosystem performance, funding landscape, the experience of our founders, the availability of experienced talent, and global market reach. And this is our radar graph here. You can see the top 5 ecosystems plotted out. Silicon Valley, the orange one, and the blue one, then is Seoul. And you can see the gap that we have. If we have the biggest gap for us remains global market reach, the ability to create connections and to create export success for our startups. It's very stark. Yeah, this is probably the biggest opportunity, and I'm so glad we discussed it in the session prior to mine this morning already, what needs to happen and what can happen here. Have we improved over the last year? Not so much. Well, we looked through our rankings, you see them, funding, so. Experience going up in Seoul as a function of so many entrepreneurs being here. But market reach is really the one where we have even lost ground in the last year a little bit, yeah? Showing our analysis. Here we would hope for more activity that helps founders step out of the Korean market and develop these international categories. What does it take to scale a business properly? This is our new scale-up report, not published yet. We are meant to show that at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress next week in Australia. So don't tell anybody I've showed it, but I wanted to show it for our entrepreneurs in the room. What does it really take or what are key success factors in scaling a business? The global scale-up rate is 3.8% on average. 100 startups, 3.8 make it to a scale-up. If you have advisors with equity in your company, ideally advisors that can mentor, ideally advisors that have international business relationships, you grow your chance of success to 5.6%. If you have founder connections to fellow founders, other entrepreneurs in the top ecosystems in the world, more than 4 connections was our measure here, you grow to 7% in terms of probability of scaling success. And last but not least, if you really manage to have more than 20% of your revenue abroad in another continent, scale-up rate goes up to 10.4%. Statistics maybe not so interesting. What's really interesting is the difference. If you don't do these things, you see what happens to your scale-up rate, it goes down. The difference being at 25x. These very simple measures: get the right advisors, get the right connections to other ecosystems, to other founders, to tap their knowledge base and try to build this export business. The difference is 25x in scale-up success. So we find the results are quite impressive, and I hope they encourage many founders to do these things and to look at these things. Oop. I think we are stuck again. Oh, Brian, thank you. Yeah, last but not least, addressing remaining funding gaps. We asked ourselves, how is the funding situation for Seoul startups? And this is what we call a funding attrition funnel. So at the beginning, we start at seed stage, 100%. We plot the top 5 ecosystems, and we go all the way to Series A and Series B+. And what is really interesting, we found it astonishing to see the data, is the blue line. This is Seoul, the red line is New York City. We are tracking in parallel. We have the same number of startups, the same percentage of startups that are receiving seed, Series A, even Series B+, late stage funding. On the same token, we asked ourselves, what's scale-up production rate, defined as the percentage of companies valued over $100 million in valuation, 2.85% for Seoul, New York City, 27.8%. So where are these stark differences coming from? It was a bit of a conundrum, yeah? Everybody goes to late stage, Series B+, but still we don't get the scale-up rates and these larger valuations that come with scaling. We believe when we look at the average size of funding tickets in Seoul, in Korea, this is Series B+, 11 million that we can measure on average. This is way too small to sustain such a scaling journey. Again, if we compare ourselves with the top 5 in the world. Yeah, I think that's where we really have a gap. We are getting Series B, but the Series B rounds are still too small to really sustain global expansion. Is this something we can fix this policy? Possibly not directly. This is not something that a bit of state funding would fix. This is a function of a business model. Is my business model export-orientated enough? Is it successful enough? Do I get the attention of Series B investors that are willing to make these larger investments that we are seeing in the other cities? So I think that's a call to action to our founders in a sense as well, to say if you're working towards a world market, you will get the larger Series B rounds that fund your expansion. If you don't, if you focus on the domestic market, you will be limited in the capital you can get access to. That's our interpretation here. I think we are not far off from the truth. The entire thing a little bit accelerated by still an absence is the wrong word, but a lower probability of foreign large VC groups investing in Korea. Last year we did a much more detailed analysis, and it was very clear that the top groups in the world, VC groups in the world, are not as active in Seoul as they are active in the other top 5 ecosystems. Not the biggest surprise, but something to keep in mind. We need to attract more of them to make investments here. Quick recommendations. Let me sum it up. Building out the deep tech funnel. So activate universities, culture, policy change. Not easy to do. It's complex to do. It's human beings. We need to influence culture, but it is absolutely possible. And I believe we need to do more here. Subsector strategies. Can we focus on a few instead of trying to address everything at the same time? Quite probably deep tech, of course, is the priority. Invest into supporting programs that help get from the research, get from the lab, into a startup, the incubators, the right incubator programs. Programs that help a very young startup coming from research also to experience international markets very early on and take that into their design, into their product design decisions. I'm so glad SPA has experimented with us a little bit of taking young deep tech startups into other places in the world. We went to Tokyo together. I think that these are initial steps that can only help to further drive success here. Soft landing programs, yes, that's what I meant, for deep tech startups to early on experience how other markets, B2B markets in the world work. Enhancing global market reach, mentorship, global scaling skills. There are a number of programs in the world. Future 50 London, as an example, I had the pleasure of working with for a number of years. Maybe the preeminent mentorship, scaling mentorship program that has really helped London become what it is. These mentorship activities, I think we need to strengthen, very much bringing in mentors from other destinations in the world where we want to step out to and develop markets. Entirely possible. And since COVID, we've seen how these networks have become much more virtual, much more accessible. So even if I'm not in Silicon Valley, not in London, I have access to experienced entrepreneurs that are giving back and that are providing these critical mentorship elements and market connections, partnerships with other ecosystems, driving VC, foreign VC participation. I think we need to talk a little bit more policy incentives for foreign VC groups to have a stronger focus on Seoul, so that we fix the Series B funding gap. And again, remaining funding gaps, partnerships with foreign VCs. That's not policy, that's more informal. Developing partnerships, taking my portfolio as a Seoul-based VC to an international group to say, do you want to co-invest? Shall we partner? You bring your experience, your mentorship network as a foreign VC. I bring the very best in my portfolio from Seoul. What can we do together? I think there's a little bit more we can do. One controversial one, but I want to mention it. I think we need to go a little bit deeper in research. Review of public funding. We have the impression that seed stage funding, angel, venture VC, is almost getting crowded out by Seoul as a government doing too much of a good thing by providing a lot of grant finance, but to some degree, crowding out the formation of angel groups and of seed VCs. We want to review that. We don't have the precise data, but we believe there's an element where we can save the state a little bit of money and activate more private investment into the Seoul ecosystem. These are initial pointers that we see in data. Needs a bit more validation from our perspective. And the formation of specialized angel and seed VC groups that really have an understanding of bioscience or of robotics and are willing to invest into these deep tech technologies. That's it in a nutshell. Where does that leave us? Try to show a little bit what are the costs of these different strategies, what is their impact. Deep tech, plus 25% in exits, that's what we would expect from a deep tech strategy. Much more important, significantly broaden the funnel all across the ecosystem. So if we need to create a few thousand more startups to compete with Tel Aviv, we would hope that they are coming from deep tech, and policies, programs should be in place that support this growth, startup creation and deep tech. So this is a really broad and diverse portfolio of activities that we think would be the right ones. This is a long-term game. This is not something that has immediate effect, but it's all the more important to address. Very different global connectedness, global market reach, mentorship to scale companies to foreign markets is something that directly results in higher investments, higher valuations and exits in our experience. So we would believe an investment into programs in that space will directly, or very quickly at least, trigger a 100% increase in exits and these higher valuations that we are looking for. Funding, again, an important component, maybe 2x for exits, and it supports new segments such as deep tech, so it's part of the cluster of activities. And last but not least, if you are continuing to make these investments, all the good work around community building and talent activation, bringing more people into the Seoul startup ecosystem that you all have done over the last few years needs to continue, because we need to bring thousands more entrepreneurs and tech startup executives into that space. That's it in a nutshell. I hope this gives you a little bit of an impression. Again, deep tech for sure, the growth mentorship to step into foreign markets, and addressing and refining a little bit the funding instruments would be our recommendations if we are to make it 6% compound annual growth rate in terms of startup creation than we are with Tel Aviv in 5 years' time. It's a great objective. Thanks for giving us a chance to present initial thoughts, and we would love an ongoing discussion with all of you going forward, and hopefully next year we are already on our way to the top 5. Thank you very much.
스테판 퀘스터님께 다시 한번 큰
Please
박수
give another
부탁드리겠습니다.
round of
Would you
big
please
applause
put
to
your
the
seat through
speaker.
this way? Please give him a big round of applause once again. 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
감사합니다. 스타트업 진흥 수석 전략가이신
So that was from the
스테판
Stefan Quester from the Startup Genome. That concludes the global top 5 session of the TryEverything 203 to 3. And surely the next session that is anticipated by many will begin, entitled Entrepreneurship Busking at this venue. And I believe that we already have many expert participants here already. So you can pitch for many businesses at the Entrepreneurship Busking. I will see you in a minute.